During my overnight shift at the hospital, 2 patients were admitted to the emergency room. I never imagined they'd be my husband and his mistress. Remaining calm was the first step to making her pay a high price, while my unfaithful husband was shortly after thrown out of the house. He left empty-handed, begging for my forgiveness. The sharp scent of operating room disinfectant seemed to have permeated every fiber of my being, every root of my hair. At 10 o'clock at night, the complex surgery to remove a tumor had finally concluded. I peeled off my surgical mask, which had left 2 deep lines on my cheeks, and felt every one of my vertebrae protest with exhaustion. 12 hours on my feet in maximum concentration had left me spent. I longed only to return to the warmth of my home, sink into my bed, and drift off to sleep. My husband, Jason, was away on a business trip in New York City. He wasn't due back until the weekend. The house felt a little empty without him, but after a day like today, silence was a luxury I craved. I dragged my feet wearily toward the break room. Just as I was about to change out of my scrubs, the shrill ring of the internal phone shattered the stillness. I picked up. The urgent voice of the charge nurse in the ER echoed on the line. "Dr. Sophia, can you come down to the consultation room, please? We have a gynecology case, a pregnant woman who fainted next to her husband. The situation doesn't look good." A pang of annoyance went through me, but it was quickly displaced by a doctor's sense of responsibility. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. In this profession, there are no hours. I slipped my white coat back on, tidied my somewhat messy bun, and hurried toward the elevator. The hospital hallway at night was long and cold, broken only by the rhythmic echo of my footsteps. Another interrupted night, I thought. The ER was always a noisy chaos. The smell of blood and alcohol, the shouts, the cries, the screech of gurney wheels on the tile floor. I was more than used to the scene. The charge nurse met me, and as we walked, she updated me. Patient Isabella Reynolds, 25 years old, pregnant, suffered a syncopal episode. The companion is her husband. He states she slipped and fell in the bathroom. The woman got so scared she fainted. The husband also has a slight head trauma. I nodded, following the nurse toward one of the beds separated by a curtain. In the distance, I saw a man sitting in a chair with his hand on his head. His figure was incredibly familiar to me. My heart lurched. My steps slowed. How was this possible? Jason should have been in New York City. It must be someone who looks like him. I tried to convince myself, but an inexplicable sense of dread took hold of me. When the curtain was pulled back, the harsh white light of the ER illuminated the 2 people inside, and my world collapsed. The man was, without a doubt, Jason, my husband. He was wearing the gray silk pajamas I had gifted him myself for his birthday, the very ones he said he would take on his important business trip. He had a reddish bruise on his forehead, but what paralyzed me wasn't his presence there, but the woman lying unconscious on the gurney, a young girl with a delicate but pale face, and above all, her prominently bulging belly. The clinical chart hanging at the foot of the bed clearly indicated 2 names, Jason Miller, husband, and Isabella Reynolds, wife. Husband and wife. Those 2 words were like 2 daggers stabbing directly into my heart. I stood petrified, feeling the air around me become dense and unbreathable. Jason lifted his head. When our eyes met, his face transformed. From surprise, it turned to confusion, and finally, to absolute panic. His lips trembled, unable to articulate a word. He could never have imagined that, in such an ironic circumstance, the doctor called for the consultation would be his own wife. The noise of the ER seemed to fade away, leaving only a terrifying silence between the 3 of us. My husband's business trip, a pregnant mistress, a fateful medical consultation. All the loose pieces of the puzzle suddenly clicked into place, forming the crudest and most repulsive image of betrayal. In that instant, a wave of rage consumed me, a fury that seemed capable of burning everything. I wanted to rush at him, scream, demand answers, turn the ER upside down so everyone would know the true face of the man I had always trusted. I clenched my fists so hard that my nails dug into my palms. The physical pain helped me cling to the little rationality I had left. But I'm a doctor, and this is a hospital. I knew better than anyone that making a scene right now would only turn me into everyone's laughingstock, and I would be the most harmed. The prestige I had built for years as a professional could crumble in a single night. Jason, after the initial shock, jumped up. He looked at me with an expression of pleading and terror. He approached me and in a low voice, almost a pathetic whisper, he implored me, "Sophia, what are you doing here? Let me explain." I looked him directly in the eyes. My voice came out cold, devoid of emotion, but loud enough for only the two of us to hear. "Mr. Miller, right now you are the family member of a patient, and I am the doctor. I ask you to maintain your composure. The rest of the matters can wait." Every one of my words was sharp as a scalpel, making him tremble. He knew my character. Once I made a decision, nothing could make me change my mind. Seeing that I had no intention of causing a scandal immediately, his face showed slight relief, although the anxiety was still evident. He backed up a few steps, cornering himself, not daring to look at me again. I turned to the nurse, my voice now normal, professional, and with a terrifying calm. "What is the patient's status?" "Vitals are stable." The nurse, somewhat surprised by my change, quickly informed me. I listened, nodded, and began to examine the woman named Isabella. When my hand touched her cold skin, a wave of repulsion washed over me. This was the woman who had wormed her way into my marriage, the one carrying my husband's child in her belly. But I suppressed everything. I checked her pulse, her blood pressure, listened to the fetal heartbeat. Every movement was precise without the slightest tremor. In my mind, there was only one thought: keep calm, control the situation. While an orderly was taking Jason away on a gurney to do a CT scan and rule out injuries, he passed beside me without taking his eyes off me. He wanted to say something, but restrained himself. Taking advantage of a moment of distraction as the gurney passed by me, I quickly leaned in with the speed of lightning and slipped his cell phone out of his pants pocket. It was an impulsive act, but I knew it could be the key to unveiling all the secrets he was hiding. I pressed the phone into my coat pocket, feeling the cold metal. When I was alone next to Isabella's bed, I allowed myself a long sigh. The previous rage had dissipated, giving way to a ruthless coldness. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't break down. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me weak. I would turn this pain into my strength. A plan began to form in my mind. I wouldn't foolishly expose them. I would make them pay for their betrayal, and the price would be the highest. I would reclaim everything that belonged to me, both materially and morally. In this game, I would dictate the rules, and I would undoubtedly be the winner. After Jason was taken away, I had more time to observe the woman on the gurney. Isabella had begun to regain consciousness. Her long eyelashes trembled, and her eyes opened slowly. She had a fragile beauty, the kind men feel the need to protect. Her large, round eyes looked around, disoriented, until they stopped at her abdomen, which she instinctively embraced. Seeing me next to her, dressed as a doctor, she whispered in a faint voice, "Doctor, is my baby okay?" Her voice was clear, with an infantile lilt. I looked at her, forcing myself to maintain a face that expressed nothing more than professional concern. "Don't worry. The fetus is stable, but you fainted due to emotional shock and exhaustion. We need to keep you under observation." Isabella didn't seem to pay much attention to my face. Probably in her eyes, I was just one of the many doctors in the hospital. She was only concerned about the child inside her. This reinforced my suspicion that she probably didn't know who I was. Jason wouldn't have shown her a picture of me. A bold idea crossed my mind. I wanted to test it. Slowly, I brought my hand to my face and lowered the mask that covered me almost completely. I stared her in the eyes, waiting for a reaction. A frown, a look of surprise, anything that indicated she recognized me, but nothing. Her eyes remained clear without the slightest alteration. She looked at me like a complete stranger. Perhaps the ER light was too intense, or she was still stunned, or Jason had simply kept her very much in the dark. Whatever the reason, her not recognizing me was an advantage destiny was offering me. "Your face looks familiar," she suddenly said, but her tone was indifferent, more a casual comment than a real suspicion. My heart quickened a little, but I maintained my composure. I managed a slight professional smile. "You've probably seen me around the hospital. After all, I work here." I decided I had to keep my prey under control. I couldn't let her be discharged and disappear with Jason. I needed time to investigate, gather evidence, and execute my plan. I began to use medical terminology to analyze the potential risks to the fetus after a shock like the one she had suffered. I painted a rather serious scenario about the risk of threatened miscarriage if she wasn't carefully monitored. Although your condition is now stable, we can't predict what will happen. The mother's psychological state greatly affects fetal development. Your husband's accident in front of you has been a major impact. We recommend you be admitted for a few days so we can monitor you closely. It's for the safety of both of you, I told her, with a firm yet persuasive tone. At first, Isabella hesitated. She said she didn't want to bother her husband, that he was also injured, but I quickly interrupted her. Your husband's health is being handled by the trauma doctors. Your health and your babies are our responsibility. He, without a doubt, will want the best for both of you. My words, both logical and emotional, seemed to hit the mark. She was a young woman, and it was her first pregnancy. I truly wonder if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to be quiet, to maintain peace, or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion because every story is like a candle that can light the way for someone else. The concern for her child overcame everything. Finally, after a moment of hesitation, she nodded. Okay, then I leave myself in your hands, doctors. The prey had voluntarily entered the cage. I called a nurse to process Isabella's admission, asking that she be accommodated in a room on the maternity floor, the same one where I worked. From now on, all her movements would be under my control. I put my mask back on, hiding the cold smile that was forming on my lips. The curtain had just risen. After arranging Isabella's admission, I returned to my break room. The room was strangely silent. I locked the door and sank into an armchair. The exhaustion suddenly hit me with full force, but this was no time to rest. I took Jason's phone out of my pocket. The screen lit up, showing our wedding photo as the wallpaper. My happy smile in the photo now seemed like a farce, a mockery. The anger resurfaced. How dare he use our wedding photo as his wallpaper while sleeping with someone else? Jason's audacity knew no bounds. I took a deep breath, trying to push away the emotions to focus on what was important. Unlocking that phone, I started trying familiar passwords. Our wedding anniversary, error, my date of birth, error, his date of birth, still giving an error. I tried combinations of both the day we started dating. Nothing worked. Every time the screen showed incorrect password, my heart suffered a new cut. It seemed he had discarded everything that belonged to our past. He had built a new world, a new life where I didn't exist. Just as I was about to give up, thinking of taking it to a store the next day to have it unlocked, a fleeting thought struck me. If the password wasn't about me, it was very likely about her. I remembered the information from the clinical chart, Isabella Reynolds, born August 12th. Tremblingly, I entered the sequence 8 and 12. The screen still showed error. Perhaps it was with the year of birth. I tried again, 081298. The phone vibrated gently, and the home screen appeared. I had done it. But what I felt was not joy, but a bitterness that chilled me to the bone. He had used his mistress's date of birth as the password. That substitution was crueler than any word. With trembling hands, I opened the messaging app. Dozens of conversations with a contact saved as My Life H appeared. I clicked. Cloying messages and cheesy declarations of love hit me in the face. Honey, I missed you so much. My champ, did he behave today? I sent you money so you can buy little things and take care of yourself. I quickly scrolled past, feeling as if someone were squeezing my heart. And then I found what I was looking for, messages about work. It turned out Jason and Isabella were colleagues. Jason was a department head, and Isabella an employee under his charge. Their relationship had begun about 3 months ago, right when Jason started his unscheduled business trips. In one message, Isabella seemed worried about me. Jason reassured her by sending her a photo of a divorce certificate, promising her that our matter was settled, but that we hadn't made it public yet for fear of damaging my reputation. A fake divorce certificate. His deceit was built with nauseating sophistication and premeditation. But what left me breathless was when I opened the banking app. The transaction history showed that over the last 3 months, Jason had transferred large sums of money to Isabella, totaling almost $55,000. $55,000 was the money we had saved with so much effort for years, intending to use it as a down payment for a townhouse in the suburbs. He hadn't hesitated to use our joint assets to maintain his mistress. The numbers danced before my eyes as if they were laughing at my naivety and blind trust. The phone in my hand was no longer a simple communication device. It was a Pandora's box full of evidence of betrayal, deceit, and dirty conspiracies. Carefully, I took screenshots of all the messages, the transaction history, and the fake divorce certificate and sent them to a secret email account. These would be the sharpest weapons in the war that was about to begin. After an almost sleepless night, my head was spinning with 1,000 thoughts, but strangely, I felt clearer than ever. The evidence from Jason's phone had shattered any illusion I had left about my marriage. There was no longer pain or remorse, only the determination to see this game through to the end. In the morning, upon arriving at the hospital, the first thing I did was go to the clinical records archive. I requested to review the complete file and the ultrasound results of the patient Isabella Reynolds. As her treating physician, my request was totally legitimate. With the file in hand, I went to my office and locked the door. I turned the pages one by one, reading meticulously. All the information matched what I already knew, but my attention stopped at a small detail on the initial admission sheet. In the section date of last menstrual period, Isabella had declared a date from just over 2 months ago, and the emergency doctor's diagnosis clearly indicated a gestation of approximately 7 to 8 weeks. 7 or 8 weeks, about 50 days. This figure fit perfectly with the 3 months she and Jason had been together. If the pregnancy was 50 days, it was very likely the father was Jason. This posed a small obstacle to my plan, but I didn't trust declarations. I trusted science, what my eyes saw. I moved to the ultrasound image taken the previous night. As an experienced gynecologist, a simple glance was enough for me to estimate the gestational age based on the biometric parameters: biparietal diameter, abdominal circumference, femur length. I placed the film on the view box and squinted, observing carefully. The numbers were clear. The embryo was quite developed. The basic organs had already formed. I made a quick mental calculation. Impossible for it to be 7 weeks based on the size and degree of development. The fetus was at least 12 or 13 weeks, meaning 3 months, 3 months. A huge difference from the 50 days Isabella had declared. 3 months ago, Jason and Isabella hadn't even started their illicit relationship. This could only mean one thing. The baby Isabella was expecting was not Jason's. An electric current ran through my body. There was the ultimate weapon I was looking for. Jason was being deceived. He was eagerly awaiting another man's child, and furthermore, he spared no expense to maintain them. He was unknowingly cuckolding himself in the biggest way imaginable. His stupidity was despicable, but also laughable. And Isabella, she was no innocent. She had calculated everything meticulously, looking for a wealthy sucker like Jason, willing to pay to legitimize her pregnancy. The feint the other night, supposedly out of concern, had been a masterful performance. I sat in silence for a moment, feeling a mixture of indignation and satisfaction. Suddenly, everything became much clearer and simpler. I wouldn't reveal the truth immediately. No, that would be too easy for them. I would play their own game. I would let Jason remain immersed in his fantasy of being a father. I would let him sink even deeper into that mire. I would allow him to personally care for that child, only to, at the last moment, throw the truth in his face. Wanted to see his expression when he discovered that both his wife and his mistress had made a complete fool of him. That pain, without a doubt, would be 1,000 times worse than in discovering a simple infidelity. I smiled, a cold, calculating smile. The game was getting more and more interesting. That same afternoon, after Jason's CT scan confirmed he only had a mild contusion, he came looking for me. He sighted me in the doctor's break room, a place where long ago we had shared brief moments stolen from work to be together. The setting was the same, but the people had changed. Jason entered and closed the door carefully. He no longer looked terrified like the night before. Instead, he showed a feigned calm. He looked at me with a complex expression, a mixture of guilt, scrutiny, and something akin to a challenge. "Sit down," I told him, pointing to the chair opposite with a calm voice. I was mentally prepared for this conversation. I knew I had to act. And do it perfectly. Jason sat down, intertwining his hands on his lap. He remained silent for a long time, as if choosing his words. Finally, he spoke in a grave voice. Sophia, I'm sorry. I know anything I say now it is useless, but truly I interrupted him, not with a reproach, but with a choked sob. I covered my face with my hands and my shoulders began to shake. Tears, a weapon I rarely used, burst forth with astonishing ease. I cried for my marriage, for the betrayed trust, and for the role I was forced to play. Seeing me cry, Jason seemed disconcerted. He stood up, paced the room, and then sat down next to me. He tried to put a hand on my shoulder, but withdrew it. Don't be like this, please. I know I made a mistake. A mistake? What a gentle word you use. I lifted my head to look at him with reddened eyes. You said you were going on a business trip and you were with another woman, and she's pregnant with your child on top of that. Jason, what am I to you? A fool you've been deceiving all this time? Jason avoided my gaze and began the litany of all adulterers. Not only did he not repent, but he had the audacity to blame me. Sophia, you have to understand me. We've been married for 5 years and we don't have children. I'm the eldest son, the pressure from my parents, from the family. Do you understand? I also want to be a father. And you're always with your job, with the hospital. Have you ever truly worried about how I feel? Hearing those words, my blood boiled, but I managed to restrain myself. I had to appear weak, let him believe he had hit my soft spot. I lowered my head, and my sobs became more desperate. Seeing that I wasn't responding, Jason grew bolder, believing he had found my weakness. He knelt in front of me. His tone softened as if granting me a favor. Things have reached this point. We have to find a solution. Isabella is a good girl. She's also a victim in all this. And the baby is not to blame. How about we raise the child together? You're a doctor. Surely you understand and care about an innocent child, right? I promise I'll break up with her. We'll just keep the child. We'll start over as if it were our child. A sick and repulsive solution. He wanted me, his legitimate wife, to raise his mistress's child. Jason's selfishness and cruelty surpassed my imagination, but my face only showed pain and confusion. I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. I don't know. I need time to think. This is too much for me. My ambiguous answer was exactly what Jason expected. In his eyes, a cornered woman, especially one reminded of her inability to have children, becomes weak and easy to manipulate. He believed I was wavering, that with a little more time I would docilely accept his proposal. He sighed with relief and stood up, patting me on the shoulder. Okay, I'll give you time. Think it over carefully. It's the best solution for everyone. He left, leaving me alone. As soon as the door closed, my tears stopped. I wiped my face, and my expression turned glacial. The first scene had gone as planned. Jason had completely dropped his guard. He would never suspect that the weak woman who had just cried before him was preparing a much larger trap, waiting for him and his little mistress to fall into it. 3 days later, just as I had planned, it was my mother-in-law's 60th birthday. Every year, Jason and I organized the trip to the town to prepare everything in advance. But this year, the incident changed everything. Jason excused himself, saying he had to stay in Boston to care for a sick acquaintance. I, of course, had to play the part of the devoted daughter-in-law. I knew my mother-in-law was a woman who valued appearances greatly and loved me very much. She had always considered me the family's the beautiful, intelligent, and attentive daughter-in-law. I decided to exploit that affection to the maximum. That morning, I went to Saks Fifth Avenue and bought an exquisite, high-end pearl necklace. Its price was almost the equivalent of my monthly salary. This gift was not only to win over my mother-in-law, but also a test for Jason. When I returned home to pack my luggage, Jason, who had just arrived from the hospital, saw the luxurious gift box on the table and frowned. What did you buy that's so expensive? Mom's birthday is a simple thing. You don't need so much. I looked at him and smiled inwardly, but outwardly I remained calm. Mom is turning 60. It only happens once. I want her to be happy. Money is important, but feelings are more so, don't you think? Jason didn't say anything else, but his expression gave him away. He was bothered by the money. He could spend thousands of dollars on his mistress, but a gift for his own mother seemed like a waste. I knew that money, in his mind, should have been for Isabella, for his son. I drove alone to the town. My in-laws' house was on the outskirts, in a quiet and peaceful setting. Seeing me arrive alone, my mother-in-law was a little surprised but didn't reproach me. She took my hands and said affectionately, "Jason, still with work, honey? Well, it doesn't matter. As long as you're here, I'm happy." The birthday party was an intimate family celebration. I cooked my mother-in-law's favorite dishes myself and didn't stop attending to and caring for her. My expensive gift made her radiate happiness. She kept showing it to relatives. Throughout the evening, I maintained a smile on my face, perfectly playing my role as the ideal daughter-in-law. That night, when everyone had left, as I helped my mother-in-law clean up the kitchen, Jason called her. I pretended to go to the bathroom but hid behind the door, listening to their conversation. "Mom, how was the birthday? Did you have a good time?" Jason asked in a wheedling tone. After a few courtesy questions, he got to the point. "Hey, Mom, the money from the land expropriation behind the house. Has the city council already paid you?" My mother-in-law replied, "Yes, they deposited it last week. Why do you ask?" "No, for nothing," Jason stuttered. "It's just that I need some money for an investment, a business. See if you could lend me a little. I'll pay you back as soon as I can." My heart quickened, just as I had predicted. He needed money for Isabella. I clearly heard my mother-in-law sigh on the other end of the line. "Investments again. The money we save is for your future, son, but you should talk to your wife. Sophia is a sensible girl. Don't make decisions on your own." "I know, Mom, but this is a man's thing. If I tell her, she might not understand." "Come on, Mom, lend it to me. I promise I'll make a profit." Jason kept insisting. I didn't need to hear more. It was enough. Not only was he cheating on me, but he was also trying to extract money from his parents to support his mistress and another man's child. Jason's baseness had erased any feeling I might still have had for him. I silently returned to the kitchen and continued cleaning up as if nothing had happened. But in my mind, a new, much crueler plan was already taking shape. During dinner at my in-laws' house, the atmosphere was very cheerful. My father-in-law, a man of few words but very affectionate, kept putting food on my plate. My mother-in-law wouldn't stop praising her daughter-in-law. Amidst trivial conversations, she suddenly looked at me and sighed. "You've been married for 5 years now, both with stable jobs. Are you going to keep planning for much longer? It's time to think about children. Your father and I are already old. We just want to have a grandchild to spoil." There it was, the moment I'd been waiting for. I knew sooner or later this topic would come up. Hearing my mother-in-law, I gently placed my cutlery on the table. My eyes, which had until then shone with joy, were suddenly covered with a thin layer of sadness. I lowered my head, and my shoulders began to tremble slightly. The atmosphere at the table instantly became tense. My in-laws, seeing my reaction, were confused. "Honey, I didn't mean any harm. Don't take it the wrong way," my mother-in-law quickly said. I raised my head with already reddened eyes, forcing a smile. "No, it's not that, Mom. It's not because of what you said. It's just, I began to say, but choked on a sob. I couldn't continue. All eyes were on me, full of concern. I took advantage of that moment, reached into my purse and took out a paper folded into quarters, a paper I had prepared beforehand. It was a meticulously falsified clinical analysis report with corresponding signatures and hospital seals. With a trembling hand, I slid it to my mother-in-law. My voice cracked. "Actually, I've been hiding this from you for a long time. We also want to have children truly, but the problem is me. My health doesn't allow it." My mother-in-law put on her glasses and took the paper to read it. Her face turned pale. The report clearly indicated a diagnosis of elevated prolactin levels in the blood, affecting ovulation and the ability to conceive. It was a real medical condition and one of the common causes of female infertility, whose diagnosis and treatment are complex. I had chosen this illness to make my performance more credible. "My God, how is this possible?" that my mother-in-law exclaimed, her voice full of astonishment and compassion. She turned to look at me with an expression of deep pity. "Why didn't you tell us sooner, honey? My poor child, suffering alone all this time." I could only shake my head as tears streamed down my cheeks. "I was afraid you would worry. I'm undergoing treatment, but the doctor says I'll need time." The rest of the dinner passed in silence. No one was in the mood for cheerful conversation. My father-in-law merely put more food on my plate, a gesture of silent comfort. During my performance, Jason, who wasn't present, would surely feel relieved if he knew. He didn't say a word when I told him on the phone. This farce had achieved two goals at once. First, I'd placed all the responsibility for the infertility problem on me. Jason was completely free of suspicion, like a healthy man who just had the bad luck to marry a woman with problems. Second, and more importantly, I had solidly reinforced the reason why he needed to have a child outside the marriage. Now, his child with Isabella was no longer a condemnable act of adultery, but could be interpreted as the legitimate desire of a man who longs for an heir to continue the family name, given that his wife cannot give him one. Jason must have been secretly thanking me for paving the way for him. He would never suspect that this smokescreen was only an intermediate step. The false report about my illness would make the real report about his azoospermia, absence of sperm, which I would reveal later, a devastating blow, an irrefutable truth that would leave him no escape route. I'd managed to make him blindly believe that the problem was mine, and that Isabella's child was his only hope. Returning to the city after the trip to the town, I felt much stronger. Every step of my plan was moving in the right direction. Jason had completely swallowed the story I invented. He even showed understanding and comforted me, but I knew that behind that facade hid his satisfaction at having gotten rid of the burden. Meanwhile, Isabella remained docilely admitted to the hospital. Under my care, everything was under control. However, I knew that to secure victory, I needed to know my opponent thoroughly. Isabella couldn't just be an innocent girl who had gotten caught up in this. Tell me whether you have parents, grandparents, or older family members who deserve more respect than they currently receive from their families. Alternatively, tell me if you yourself are going through a situation in which you're not appreciated as much as you truly deserve. The deception about the fetus's age showed she was a calculated person. I needed to know more about her past, her previous relationships, her family environment. I remembered Mark, a former university classmate. Mark didn't pursue medicine. He studied law, and after a few years opened a well-known private detective agency. We didn't keep in frequent contact, but the friendship from our student years was still there. I decided to turn to him. I met Mark in a quiet coffee shop. When I roughly told him my situation, he couldn't hide his surprise. He patted my shoulder empathetically. "I can't believe it, Sophia. I always thought Jason and you were the perfect couple, but, well, what's done is done. How can I help you?" "I need you to investigate a person," I said, handing him a sheet with all of Isabella's data I'd obtained from her clinical chart. Full name, date of birth, place of origin. "I want to know everything about her past. The more detailed, the better." Mark looked at the paper and nodded professionally. "All right, this isn't difficult. Give me a week." Exactly 1 week later, Mark called me. We met at the same place. He placed a rather thick dossier on the table. "Everything you need is here." I opened the dossier, my heart beating a little faster. The information it contained far exceeded my expectations. Isabella came from a humble family in a small town, but since arriving in the city to study at the university, her life had completely changed. She was known as one of the most beautiful girls in her faculty, always surrounded by suitors. The most revealing fact was that in her second year of university, she had married a young millionaire, the son of the owner of a large construction company. The marriage lasted just over a year. According to Mark's information, the reason for the divorce was that Isabella couldn't fit in with her husband's family. But the key point was that after the divorce, Isabella received a huge financial compensation, enough to buy a small apartment and live comfortably for a long time. After divorcing, Isabella did not return to the university. She began a life of luxury, associating with several wealthy and older men. Her job at Jason's company was just a cover. She hadn't been there long. The dossier included several photos of Isabella entering and leaving luxury restaurants and hotels with different men. All this had happened just before meeting Jason. Reading that, I understood everything. Isabella was no amateur gold digger. She was a professional. She knew how to use her beauty and apparent fragility as bait for men with money and status, but with marital problems like Jason. The baby in her womb was most likely the result of one of those previous fleeting relationships, and Jason, with his blind desire for a child, had become the perfect sugar daddy. I closed the dossier, feeling a glacial coldness inside. My hatred for Jason and Isabella multiplied. They had not only betrayed me, they were two scammers collaborating to appropriate my assets. I thanked Mark and paid him generously for his services. With the dossier in hand, I knew I had a new ace up my sleeve. This war would have no mercy. A few days later, Isabella was discharged. Her health had stabilized, and keeping her in the hospital longer would have raised unnecessary suspicion. I signed her discharge report and gave her the usual instructions for a pregnant woman. Like a dedicated doctor, Isabella thanked me effusively, her gaze completely free of suspicion. I took the day off that morning. I didn't drive straight home, but drove to a coffee shop across from the hospital entrance. I chose a table in a corner from where I could observe the exit area. I wanted to see with my own eyes where Jason was taking his new home. Around 9, Jason appeared, driving the car we had bought together on installments, now used to transport his mistress. He helped Isabella out of the hospital carefully, opened the car door for her, and settled her into the seat. Those tender and attentive gestures that were once only for me. Now, seeing them, I no longer felt pain, only a bitter irony. The car started, I started mine and followed at a safe distance. Jason's car did not head towards our house or his parents' house. It headed towards a new development on the west side of the city, a prosperous area with modern luxury apartment buildings. My heart sank. I had a bad feeling. Finally, the car stopped in front of the entrance of an elegant building, a building I could not forget. It was the apartment we had bought 2 years ago with all our savings. We had planned together that when we had a child, it would go to the international school nearby, and we would move there. That house held all our dreams and plans for a happy future. I remember that just 3 months ago, the same time Jason started his relationship with Isabella, he came home very happy and announced that he had found a tenant for that apartment for an excellent price. He said we would rent it out to make a profit while continuing to live in our current house. At the time, I believed him blindly and even praised him for being so foresighted. It turned out that everything was a blatant lie. He hadn't rented it out. He was preparing it for his new family, a family without me. Sitting in the car, I watched Jason help Isabella into the building. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Indignation reached its peak. That was my house, bought with the sweat of my brow, and now it had become the love nest of an intruder and another man's child. He had not only betrayed me, he was usurping my property in plain sight. Jason's cruelty had crossed all limits. He didn't just want a child, he wanted to take everything that was mine, my love, my money, and even my dream home. Very well, if he wanted to play until the end, I would play along. I would let them enjoy their ephemeral happiness in that house. The higher they climbed, the harder the fall would be. I would make them return everything with interest. I took out my phone and dialed a number. "Mark's law firm, may I help you?" After discovering that Jason had installed Isabella in our own house, I needed a few days to calm down. The initial rage gave way to steely determination. I began the next phase of my plan, approaching Isabella and pretending to worry about her. I called Jason, maintaining a weak and resigned tone of voice. "Honey, I've been thinking a lot these days. Maybe you were right, the baby is not to blame. I'd like to go visit her and the child. After all, it seems we'll be family in the future." On the other end of the line, Jason was incredibly happy and surprised. He kept praising me for being so understanding and generous. He suspected nothing. In his eyes, I was a woman who had accepted her fate of not being able to have children and was trying to save her marriage at all costs. He immediately gave me the address and told me to come in the afternoon after he had returned from work. That afternoon, I went to the apartment. Jason opened the door with a radiant smile. Isabella was sitting on the sofa. Seeing me, she seemed somewhat uncomfortable and embarrassed. I smiled kindly. I carried a large basket of fruits and some nutritious products for pregnant women. "Hello, Isabella. I'm Sophia," I said softly. "I've come to see how you and the baby are doing. Don't worry. Considering the family..." Isabella, whom Jason must have already prepared, quickly became friendly. We sat down and talked mainly about the pregnancy and care. I used all my medical knowledge to give her useful advice, which made both Jason and her look at me with admiration and trust. During the conversation, Jason happily commented, "Lately, Isabella has some very strange cravings, Sophia. She hardly eats normal food. She only fancies acidic and spicy things. She especially has a thing for Mexican food. She orders it almost every day. Hearing that, I felt a pang. In Mark's dossier, there was a crucial detail. Isabella's medical history showed that she had a history of kidney stones and had been undergoing treatment. People with this history are advised to avoid very salty, spicy, greasy, and rich foods, precisely the ingredients of many exotic and hearty dishes. It was the perfect opportunity, a trap served on a silver platter. I turned to Isabella with a sympathetic look, pretending to know a lot about the subject. It's normal for taste to change during pregnancy. You have to eat what you crave. If the mother eats happily, the child grows healthy, Jason. You have to indulge her, okay? Pregnancy is very hard. You have to take care of them and spoil them. I even added, deliberately, I know a new Mexican restaurant nearby that is incredible. Great tacos al pastor and margaritas. One of these days we have to go together. When you're pregnant and you eat what your body asks for, there's nothing better. Jason, hearing me, nodded profusely and looked at Isabella tenderly. See, honey, even Sophia says it. You eat whatever you crave, and I'll give you everything. Isabella, radiant with happiness, saw me as an understanding sister-in-law. She had no idea that my seemingly well-intentioned advice was actually a sweet poison, slowly pushing her toward the trap I had set. I wanted her kidney stone problem to reappear, and I wanted it to happen at the right moment and in the most virulent way possible. Only then could my drama reach its climax. Time passed. Almost a month after starting to play my role as the benevolent sister-in-law, I frequently visited Jason and Isabella's apartment. Sometimes I brought them food, other times I accompanied Isabella to her gynecological checkups. Our relationship had become very close. Isabella fully trusted me and told me everything, even her most intimate secrets. Jason, for his part, was increasingly satisfied, convinced that he had everything under control, a wife, a mistress, and a child on the way. Meanwhile, I continued to discreetly monitor Isabella's health. I knew that with that uncontrolled diet, rich in spice and fat, sooner or later her kidneys would protest. I felt the moment was approaching. It was time to eliminate unnecessary obstacles to prepare the grand finale. The biggest obstacle was my in-laws. They loved and trusted me, but precisely because of that, if they were in the city when everything exploded, things could take a turn that I couldn't control. My mother-in-law, although she appreciated me, would never accept that her son had been deceived in that way. She would do everything possible to protect Jason and save the family's appearance. I didn't want any unforeseen events in my plan. I needed a plausible reason for them to be out of the city for a while, and the opportunity arrived. I knew my in-laws had always dreamed of traveling to Hawaii, but they never decided because they didn't want to spend money. One weekend afternoon, I called them. After asking about their health, I said cheerfully, Dad, Mom, my job gave me a trip to Hawaii for 2 people, all-inclusive, 5 days and 4 nights in a 5-star resort, but Jason and I are swamped with work and can't go. The trip is non-refundable and it would be a shame to lose it. Why don't you go in our place? Take it as a gift from your daughter-in-law and your son. Of course, it was a lie. I had paid for the trip out of my own pocket, but it was a very sweet lie. My in-laws on the other end of the phone were beside themselves with joy. At first they refused, saying it was too much expense, but I used all my arguments to convince them. I told them that if they didn't go, the trip would be canceled and I would be very sad. Finally, they accepted. What a good daughter-in-law we have. How lucky we are, my mother-in-law told me on the phone, her voice choked with emotion. I smiled. The image of a devoted, betrayed, but resigned daughter-in-law who still cared about her husband's family was solidly reinforced. When they returned from their trip, they would trust me even more and unconditionally side with me. This trip not only eliminated an obstacle, but was also a very smart emotional investment. Everything was ready. Now I just had to wait. Wait for the last fish to take the bait. Just as I had predicted, what had to come arrived almost a month after my in-laws happily boarded a plane for Hawaii. One weekend night, while I was on call at the hospital, Jason's phone, which I still kept, remained silent, but my personal phone rang. It was Jason. My heart quickened. I knew the moment had arrived. Hello, I answered, feigning a sleepy voice. Sophia, help me. Jason's voice on the other end was a cry of panic. Isabella! Isabella is writhing in stomach pain. She's pale as a ghost. I sat up abruptly. Inside, I felt a glacial coldness, but my voice sounded alarmed. Where does it hurt? What is the pain like? Calm down and explain it clearly. She says it's a sharp pain in her lower back that radiates down to her groin. It comes in waves of pain, and she's sweating profusely. I'm so scared, Sophia. What if it's a threatened miscarriage? Jason could barely speak. His breathing was ragged. In my mind, I already had a preliminary diagnosis, a classic renal colic. My gastronomic trap had finally taken effect. I suppressed a shiver of satisfaction and made sure my voice didn't tremble. Don't panic. Bring her to the ER immediately. Quickly, I'll notify them to be prepared. I hung up and immediately called the ER, reporting a possible case of retroalcoholic colic in a 4-month pregnant woman who was on her way. Then I sat silently in the guard room, waiting. Everything was unfolding exactly as in a meticulously prepared script. Half an hour later, Jason arrived with Isabella. She lay on the gurney, her face white with pain. Jason was running around frantically, his face distraught. After the tests and routine ultrasound, the results confirmed my diagnosis. Isabella was suffering from an acute ureteral colic. A sizable calculus was lodged near the bladder, causing severe hydronephrosis. The next morning, just as my shift was ending, Jason sought me out, looking exhausted and with dark circles under his eyes. He led me to a quiet corner of the hallway and pleaded with me. Sophia, the urologist says Isabella needs an operation to remove the calculus, otherwise her kidney could be damaged. But I'm afraid the surgery will affect my son. You're a gynecologist, isn't there another way? Some way to remove the calculus and save the child? His selfishness manifested once again. In his head, only his child existed. Isabella's pain and laugh seemed secondary, and that was exactly what I wanted. I pretended to reflect deeply and then said, surgery at this stage of pregnancy carries risks for the fetus, it's true, but leaving the calculus there is also very dangerous for the mother. There is a conservative treatment. High doses of progesterone can be injected to relax the smooth muscle with the hope that the calculus will move and be expelled. However, the success rate is not high, and if it fails, the mother's condition could worsen. Hearing the words conservative treatment, Jason's eyes lit up. He desperately grabbed my hand. Let's do that, Sophia. I can't lose this child. Isabella is strong. She'll hold out. I'm sure my son will protect his mother. I gently pulled my hand away, feeling absolute contempt. If that is your decision, I will not object. But you have to be the one to talk to the urologist and sign the informed consent, taking full responsibility. I can only advise you as a family member. Jason nodded repeatedly. He thanked me 1,000 times and ran off to find the doctor. He didn't know that his courageous decision that day was the last shovelful of dirt on the grave of his greatest hope. The stupid fish had swallowed the hook, line, and sinker. With a blindness and obstinacy typical of someone who craves an heir, Jason ignored the urologist's warnings. He insisted on the conservative treatment for Isabella and signed the document, assuming all risks. Perhaps to avoid a complicated case with such an obstinate relative, the doctors finally acceded to his request. However, Jason did not want Isabella to receive treatment at my hospital. Maybe he feared my interference or simply wanted to take his mistress to a more discreet location. He processed Isabella's voluntary discharge and took her to a rather large private clinic on the outskirts to start the progesterone treatment. I knew everything but said nothing. I limited myself to observing in silence. In the following days, Isabella's situation did not improve as Jason expected. The renal colics tormented her daily, each time with more intensity. The stubborn calculus did not move, while the fluid retention in the kidney worsened. Isabella began to have a high fever, a sign of a urinary tract infection. Jason stubbornly continued to believe that with patience, everything would be resolved. He continued taking her to the private clinic for her injections, ignoring Isabella's evident deterioration. And then the worst happened. One afternoon, as I was preparing to finish my shift, the maternity emergency phone rang. An alarmed voice from the ER informed me, Daughter Sophia, an extremely serious obstetric emergency has just been admitted. Patient Isabella Reynolds, 4 months pregnant, in a state of septic shock, multi-organ failure, and with signs of massive vaginal hemorrhage. Come down to the consultation room immediately and prepare the emergency operating room. Isabella Reynolds's name resonated like thunder. I knew the drama had reached its peak. With the greatest possible calm, I gave the orders. Prepare the operating room, reserve blood, and all the resuscitation equipment. Then I quickly changed and went down to the ER. The scene was chaotic. Isabella lay on the gurney with a grayish face and barely perceptible breathing. Beneath her, blood soaked the sheet. Jason was trembling by her side, his clothes disheveled and an expression of absolute terror like a lost soul. Seeing me, he ran towards me as if I were his only salvation. Sophia, save them. Save my wife and my son. I swatted his hand away and approached the bed with coldness. Isabella's condition was worse than I imagined. The septic shock from the urinary infection had spread throughout her body, causing a coagulation disorder that led to a uterine hemorrhage. The fetal heartbeat was no longer detectable. The baby had died. The problem was no longer saving the child, but racing against the clock to save the mother's life. Prepare her to go up to the operating room immediately. Notify anesthesia and the ICU. It's a life emergency, I ordered in a firm voice. Then I turned to Jason with a look devoid of emotion. The patient's condition is critical. The prognosis is very serious. You are the family member. Prepare for the worst. Having said this, along with the nurses, I pushed the gurney toward the elevator, leaving Jason petrified in the middle of the ER chaos. He probably still didn't understand that his own ignorance and obstinacy had led them both to the brink of death. The operating room light was blinding, the air dense with tension. On the operating table, Isabella lay motionless, her life hung by a thread, supported by a framework of machines and IV kits. The uterine hemorrhage was uncontrollable. Her atonic uterus after the abortion was not contracting. Blood flowed incessantly. We had exhausted all uterotonic drugs. We had tried all possible conservative techniques, but nothing worked. After more than an hour of desperate struggle, the professor leading the operation, my respected mentor, had to make the most difficult decision. He turned to me and the other colleagues and said in a grave and heavy voice, "There is no other option. The patient has a severe coagulopathy and complete uterine atony. If we don't perform a hysterectomy to stop the hemorrhage immediately, we will lose her in a matter of minutes." We all fell silent. We knew it was the last resort, a cruel solution, but the only one to save a life. Removing the uterus meant Isabella would forever lose her ability to be a mother. But between life and motherhood, the choice was obvious. "Dr. Sophia," the professor called me, "please go out, explain the situation, and have the family member sign the informed consent. We don't have much time." I nodded, took off my gloves, and left the operating room. Jason was slumped in a chair in the waiting room, his head in his hands. Hearing the door, he jumped up. His bloodshot eyes looked at me with hope. "How is it, Sophia? Are Isabella and the child okay, right?" I looked him directly in the eyes. My voice came out cold and precise, as if reading a medical report. "The baby did not survive, and right now Ms. Reynolds' life hangs by a thread. She is suffering a massive hemorrhage that we cannot control. The only way to save her is to perform an emergency total hysterectomy." Every one of my words was like a hammer blow to Jason's mind. He was stunned and then desperately shook his head. "No, it can't be. Remove her uterus. Why? You're doctors. There has to be another way." "There is no other way," I stated firmly. "It is the medical team's decision. We need you to sign the consent for the operation immediately. Every second we lose brings her closer to death." I handed him the form and a pen. Jason stared at it, his hands trembling. If he signed, he would end the dream of being a father through that woman. If he signed, he would be the one to take away her ability to be a mother. If he signed, he would have to face an Isabella who was no longer useful to him. But if he didn't sign, he would become an accomplice to reckless homicide and face justice. He was cornered with no escape. The inherent selfishness in him finally yielded to the fear of responsibility. He let out a cry of despair, grabbed the pen, and scrawled his name on the paper. I took the form without deigning to look at him for a second longer and re-entered the operating room. The operation was quick. With the uterus removed, the main focus of the hemorrhage was eliminated. Isabella, for now, was out of danger. Her life had been saved, but she had paid a very high price for her stupidity and Jason's cruelty. And Jason. He himself had just signed the sentence that ended his own future. But this was only the beginning. My in-laws' flat landed on a sunny afternoon, a clear contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I had organized my work to be able to personally pick them up at the airport. I wanted to be the first to see them, the first to give them the bad news. When I saw their familiar figures at the arrivals gate, I ran toward them. My face already showed a haggard and distressed appearance, my eyes swollen as if I had been crying for days. "Sophia, what are you doing here? You look terrible. Has something happened?" My mother-in-law, after the initial joy, immediately noticed my state. I said nothing, only shook my head and burst into tears, leaning on her shoulder like a helpless child. My reaction alarmed them. They took me to a nearby bench, asking me ceaselessly, "What's wrong, honey? Tell us. Did Jason do something to you?" My father-in-law, usually quiet, also seemed impatient. Taking a breath, I looked at them, my voice catching. "Dad, Mom, I don't know how to tell you. Jason, I began to tell them my story, a carefully edited and rehearsed version. I told them how I casually discovered Jason's infidelity, how he, far from repenting, had blamed me. I told them he had impregnated another woman, a young coworker. Crying, I told them I had been devastated, that I had thought about leaving him, but that for them, for the family, I had tried to endure and had even agreed to visit and care for the other girl. I thought that if I was generous, he would reconsider. I thought that since I couldn't give him children, it was my fault he did something like this. But I was wrong, Mom. I was wrong. I collapsed in inconsolable tears. My mother-in-law listened, her face changing from disbelief to anger. She greatly valued family honor and sincerely loved me. That her golden boy had committed such a baseness was an unacceptable humiliation. "That scoundrel, that wretch," she hissed through clenched teeth, her eyes burning with fury. "How dare he do this to my daughter-in-law? Having a woman like you and going off with some tramp." She turned and squeezed my hand. "Don't cry anymore, honey. I'm here. I'm going to make him pay for this. Tell me right now where that slut and my useless son are." Sobbing, I replied, "They are at the hospital. She just lost the baby. They had to operate on her." "Good, Karma. Take me there right now. I have to see the face of the one who dares to destroy a family, and I have to teach my son a lesson." My mother-in-law stood up, spitting fire. I knew I had lit the fuse of her anger just as I wanted. She would be my battering ram, the one who would open the way for my final act. I nodded, wiped my tears, and accompanied them to the car. We headed straight to the hospital, where the real storm was about to break out. We arrived at the hospital during the afternoon visiting hours. The maternity hallway was crowded. I guided my in-laws directly to the room where Isabella was recovering from the operation. Jason was inside, peeling an apple for her. "Jason!" His mother's authoritative shout made Jason jump. The knife fell to the floor with a clatter. He turned around and his face turned ashen when he saw the three of us in the doorway. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here?" My mother-in-law, without a word, entered like a fury. She approached the bed, looked contemptuously at Isabella, and then turned to Jason. A resounding slap echoed in the room. "Wretch! And you have the nerve to ask what we're doing here. Look at the mess you've made." Then she turned to Isabella, who had shrunk in fear in the bed. Another slap, this time for her. "And you shameless slut, you dedicate yourself to seducing married men and destroying families." The room plunged into chaos. Jason tried to hold his mother back, pleading, "Mom, please, not here. This is a hospital." Isabella, after the blow, burst into tears, and suddenly, like a cornered animal, she screamed, pointing at me. "It's not my fault. It's hers. She killed my son. She made them take out my uterus. Ma'am, she's a doctor here. She planned everything." Isabella's scream left everyone stunned, including my in-laws and Jason. They turned to look at me with doubt. There it was, the moment I had waited for. Unflustered, I stepped forward, facing them all with a chilling calm. "You say I hurt you." I looked Isabella in the eyes. My voice was cold as ice. Then why don't you tell everyone who the father of the child you lost truly was? My question was like a bucket of cold water. Isabella turned pale, unable to articulate a word. Jason frowned. Sophia, what nonsense are you saying? Nah, Shen, it was my son. Your son? I let out a laugh full of sarcasm. Are you sure? Are you sure you can have children, Jason? Slowly, I took a dossier from my purse, a laboratory report I had prepared a while ago. It was not the false report about my illness, but a spermogram. I had secretly taken a sample from Jason from his underwear and sent it to a prestigious laboratory. I showed the report to everyone. My voice sounded clear and firm, silencing the murmur in the hallway. I invite you to read it. It is the result of Mr. Jason Miller's analysis. Conclusion, azoospermia, total absence of sperm in the ejaculate. For everyone to understand, he is sterile. The room fell into absolute silence. The word azoospermia fell on Jason like a death sentence. He was the first to react. He lunged and snatched the paper from me. His eyes devoured the conclusion. His hands were shaking so much that the paper crackled. Lat, this is false. You falsified it to hurt me, he roared, his face contorted with anger and panic. He turned to his mother, seeking support. Mom, don't believe her. She's jealous. She's the one who can't have children. My mother-in-law, who until a moment ago was an erupting volcano, was now paralyzed. She tremblingly took the paper that Jason had almost destroyed. She squinted to read every word. As she read, her face became paler and paler. The anger towards Isabella had transformed into absolute horror. I remained impassive. You can tear it up if you want. I have the original and a digital copy in my email, and if you don't believe me, the andrology service is on the floor below. You can go down right now to get tested and prove I'm lying. My calmness unsettled him even more. He shouted like a wounded animal and ran out of the room. Fine, I'll go get tested. I'll show you who's lying. Just as Jason was leaving, the door opened again, but this time it wasn't a nurse. It was a young man dressed in designer clothes, with slicked back hair and an arrogant air. I recognized him. He was the young millionaire Mark had investigated, Isabella's ex-husband. Seeing him, Isabella turned even paler. She stammered, What are you doing here? The man ignored her, smiled sneeringly, and applauded ironically. Well, what an interesting meeting. What a family drama I missed. He glanced at my in-laws, at me, and stopped at Isabella's flat abdomen. I heard you got rid of the problem you had in there. Good, one less headache for me. Then he addressed my in-laws with a theatrical bow. Good afternoon. Excuse the interruption, but I think I should introduce myself. I am the true father of that fetus. Another bomb exploded in the room. My mother-in-law staggered and had to grab the bed to keep from falling. The young man continued with contempt. Your dear son is just an idiot, whom this one has fooled. She tricked me into thinking she was pregnant to extort a good sum of money from me, but she was smarter and found a sugar daddy willing to give her money and a house like your son. Although, to be honest, I have to thank him. He signed that authorization for the operation, and I got rid of the problem cleanly. You could say he picked up my garbage. At that precise moment, Jason returned. He hadn't gone to get tested. He had probably realized the absurdity of the situation halfway there. He entered just in time to hear the last sentence, the sentence that stabbed his manly pride. Sterile, deceived, supporting another man's child, losing money, being everyone's laughingstock. All the brutal truths fell on him at once, shattering his sanity. His eyes became bloodshot. It was no longer anger, it was the madness of a man who has lost everything. Without a word, he lunged toward the bed. Before anyone could react, he grabbed Isabella by the hair and began to beat her wildly. Lying slut! You dared to deceive me! I'll kill you! He roared, his screams full of pain and rage. The room turned into a madhouse. Isabella's screams, my father-in-law's attempts to stop him, the ex-husband's insults, and finally, the dull thud of my mother-in-law fainting and falling to the floor. The curtain had fallen. Hospital security quickly arrived. Two burly men dragged Jason away while he continued to curse. Isabella lay in bed, disheveled, her face swollen, crying inconsolably. My mother-in-law was attended to by the nurses. Only my father-in-law, the ex-husband, and I remained in the middle of the disaster. My father-in-law seemed to have aged 10 years. He slumped into a chair, sighing heavily. When the situation calmed down, I approached Isabella's bed. Seeing me, she flinched, her eyes full of hatred and fear. I leaned in and whispered in her ear, so only she could hear me. Well, you've seen his true face. Did he love you, or just the child you were carrying to perpetuate his name? Now that there's no child, he doesn't hesitate to hit you. The one who led you to this was not me. It was him. My words were like a catalyst, purging her pain and her rage. It was true. Jason had ignored her when she was suffering. He had chosen a dangerous treatment, and now he had brutally assaulted her. All of Isabella's hatred was redirected toward Jason. With unexpected strength, she picked up her phone from the bedside table and frantically typed with trembling hands. Seconds later, an intimate video of her and Jason was sent directly to the group chat of the entire company where they worked. It was an act of self-destruction, the final revenge of someone who had nothing left to lose. The consequences were immediate. The sexual scandal erupted. The company management, to protect its image, fired Jason and Isabella the next day. The career Jason had built for years went up in smoke in one night. I didn't waste any time either. The next morning, along with my lawyer, Mark, I filed for divorce in court with all the irrefutable evidence. The video of the infidelity, the bank statements of the transfers to Isabella, the fake divorce certificate, and my in-laws' declaration. The trial was quick. The judge ruled that Jason had committed serious infidelity and had embezzled and concealed marital assets during the marriage. All the assets, including the 2 houses and the remaining money in the bank, were awarded to me. Jason left the courthouse empty-handed, without a house, without a job, without a cent. Isabella's fate was no better. After losing everything, her child, her ability to be a mother, her job, and the man she thought she could rely on, her mental health collapsed. The shock and physical trauma plunged her into a state of psychosis. She cried and laughed uncontrollably. She spoke incoherently. Finally, her family had to admit her to a mental health center. Both executioners had paid the just price for their actions. When the trial ended, I felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off me. The first thing I did was put the luxury apartment up for sale, the one that was once my dream and became the nest of his betrayal. I didn't want to keep anything that reminded me of that pain. The house sold quickly. I used part of the money to help my parents and the rest I invested. My life returned to normal. At the hospital, my professionalism and composure in managing Isabella's complicated case earned me the respect of the management and my colleagues. A few weeks later, the head of my department retired, and thanks to my merits, I was appointed to take his position. At 30, I became one of the youngest department heads in the hospital. It was a sweet recognition of my effort. A few months later, when everything seemed to have calmed down, one afternoon as I was leaving work, I saw a familiar figure waiting at the hospital entrance. It was Jason. He looked much more haggard and pathetic than the last time, thin, his skin weathered by the sun, his clothes dirty. Seeing me, he ran toward me, and then, to my astonishment and that of others, he knelt at my feet. "Sophia, please forgive me," he pleaded, crying and grasping the hem of my coat. "I know I've been an idiot, a bastard. Now that I've lost you, I know no one has ever loved me like you. Give me a chance to start over, please. I'll do anything to make it up to you." I stood still, looking at the man kneeling before me, the man I once loved with all my heart. But now there was not a shred of compassion within me, only a frozen emptiness. I gently pulled my leg away from his grip. I looked into his tearful eyes and uttered a single word, clear and definitive: "Get lost." Having said this, I turned around and walked away without looking back, ignoring his desperate cries. I got into my new car, started it, and left. I drove along the coastal road, rolling down the windows so the fresh sea breeze could fill me. The summer sky was an intense blue. I stopped the car at a solitary viewpoint and took a final piece of paper from my purse. They were the results of the sexually transmitted disease tests I had done as a precaution after the divorce. All the results were negative. I smiled, a smile of true peace. I was completely free, legally, financially, emotionally, and physically. I crumpled the paper and tossed it to the wind. I looked at the road stretching out before me, knowing that a new, free, and strong life was waiting for me.